Hello everyone. In this session we'll understand file IO, and I hope you had done some low level or high level file IO in some other programming language such as Java or C++. So what is file IO? It is basically, it gives you a platform where you can use a wide array of operations, file operations, file operations such as reading, writing and appending. Reading means you can basically make a read operation where you can read your file. Writing means you can write a file, but basically if there is any content already available in that file, it's going to be overwrite with the new data that you are passing, okay, in that particular file. So writing will be, it's going to be overwrite the previous data. And then we have appending, which is basically very similar to that of writing, but instead of overwriting, it will just paste, or you can just insert data in the next line. It will not overwrite. Okay, so let's understand in Visual Studio. See, first of all, we'll take some of the aspects of file. So if you want to use any file members or file data, file class, file methods, then you need to insert this namespace using system.io. Okay, unless you will not import that, you cannot use any file keyword. Okay, so let's go to the main, and let's I have a requirement that I want to check that the file exists in one particular location or not. So how can I do that? Is with the help of file.exist method. You see here, file.exist method needs a path. See what it needs: string path, and also it is going to be returned in a form of bool. Okay, so it needs a path. So first of all, I have to set a path. So let me set a path: string path, and I have my file. My file is test.txt. It is located in D drive, and here is that file, test.txt. So instead of this line, I have a C sharp, then Python, then C++, C, then I have Java. So yeah, I have a file line of code here in my test.txt. Okay, so let's see this. If this file exists in D drive or not, I want to check this out. Then what should I do? String path, and I will give the path. I'll use verbatim string, and I'll say D drive colon, and I will say test.txt. Okay, that's the path. Now file.exist method needs a path. Okay, so I simply give the path, and also I need to pass this whole thing inside if condition. So I'll say if, and then I'll give some message over here, and the message is something like, if the file is exist on that particular path, then I'll say file exist. I'll say file exist, and then else method, I'll say if the file is not exist there in this particular location, then I'll say file is missing. Okay, and when you run this, you will see my location have the test.txt, so definitely I'll get this message, file exist. So let me run this. Okay, so it says file exist. Now if I somehow rename, if I rename this from test.txt to test1.txt, and when I run this, you will get a message, file is missing. Okay, so that's the file.exist method. Now let's understand some other concept of file. So if there is a requirement that if you want to read, this test.txt and the content, this file line of code, and if I want to read line by line, okay, line by line, if I want to read, then I have a method called as file.readAllLines. Okay, so I have a file.readAllLine, and what exactly it needs, it also needs a path. But you see, where exactly I can save this file dot read online? I need an array for that. Okay, so first of all, let me create that array, string array, and I'll say a. Okay, and then I will say file dot read all lines, and I'll pass the path, and I will save this thing inside a. Okay, that's the thing. And I'll simply say console.writeLine, please show me the or please read me the line a and give the index over here, and I'll pass the index as 0. So whatever the index 0 line of line there in the test.txt is going to be printed. So right now it is C#, so C# is going to be printed. If I'll pass console.writeLine a1, then this first line of code is going to be printed, that is Python. So let's see that. I'll say console.writeLine and a, and I'll pass the parameters at 1, and we'll see that. Oh yeah, okay. So I need to rename this again, test.txt, and when I run this, you'll see here it says C# and Python because I'm passing 0 and 1. If I pass another index, if I pass another index here, then the next line is going to be printed. Run this, you'll see C#, Python, and C++ from my test.txt. Okay, now the requirement is something like, if I want to read all text, whatever the text inside this test.txt, if I want to read all of it, then what method should I use? File.readAllText. You see here, instead of console.writeLine and everything, you see read all text. And read all text needs what it needs. It also needs a path, but you see it doesn't need any array over here, right? So I don't need to take this array, so I'll just delete this, and I'll simply pass a path, and then I'll say console.writeLine, give me all content from the test.txt. When I run this, you'll see all content is going to be printed. C#, Python, C++, C, and Java. Fine, you got it. Okay, read all text. Now we move to something called as, if I want to make a copy of my file, this test.txt to a newer location, okay, then I can use file.copy method. Also, I can use the same name whenever when I copy this test.txt to a new location. I can also rename the test.txt to some other name, and I can copy to a certain destination. Right now, let me take string destination, and then I'll say, let me copy this test.txt to a new location, and that location is going to be like D drive, and then I have this .NET folder, and I want to save that test.txt here in this folder. Okay, so let me copy that path. Okay, so @ D drive, and I'll say .NET, and I'll paste test.txt. You can actually rename this name too. If you rename it new test.txt, it saved this test.txt and all its content in this file, new test.txt. Okay, so let me see file.copy works or not. So I'll say file.copy. When you do file.copy, it actually needs what it needs. It needs string source file name and string destination file name. So I can give my original path name, that is path, and where I want to copy this file, so I can use destination. Okay, just destination, and when I run this, the same thing happens in this location. Okay, so let's check this out, the file is copied or not. So I have this .NET folder, and I can see new test.txt, and I have test.txt here. When you open this, there are these 5 line of code, and the same this content is going to be copied over here, new test.txt, and you see we can see the same line of code, 5 line of code. Okay, so this is how we can use file.copy. Now let me see file.delete. Now let's say I want to delete new test.txt. How can I delete this? I can delete with the help of .delete method. File.delete. sorry, file dot delete. What it needs a path. You can take any path. The path should be relate with the choice that you want to delete the file. Okay, so if I want to delete new test.txt, then I'll pass destination. So I'll pass destination, and when I run this, you will see from the .NET folder this new test.txt is going to be deleted. Okay, let's check this out, and you see there is no test.txt which was earlier in this folder. Okay, now instead of doing all these read operations, let's get into some writing part. Now the requirement is something like the requirement is I want to insert some data in this test.txt. Okay, I want to insert something. Already we have file line of code, a file line of content in test.txt, and I want to insert some more content inside this file. How can I do this? Is with the help of file.WriteAllText. So let's understand this. So what it needs, file.WriteAllText. This method WriteAllText, what it needs a path. I can pass the path, but then it needs some content, and where my content is, I need to create that content. So let's create the content first. So I have string, and I'll say content equals to, and let me say I want to insert some line of code, and the line is something like hello C#, and I want to insert this in my test.txt. So I now the path and content both are ready with me, so I can pass path object and then path variable, and I can pass content. Okay, so this is ready, and when I do this, basically what will happen, this hello C# is going to be inserted in test.txt. But keep that in mind, as I told you, that writing operation in file.io is going to overwrite whatever the content is there in the test.txt. So we have file lines, C#, Python, C++, Java is going to be overwrite with hello C#. Let's see this. When I go to the drive and when I see test.txt, you see here all content is overwrite with hello C#, the content that you had just inserted. Okay, so that's the .WriteAllText. Now let's understand what is WriteAllLines. When you insert line by line, you want to insert some line by line, then how can I do this? Is basically when when we go for line by line, then we need some array, right? So you see here file.WriteAllLines. Well, this WriteAllLine needs what it needs. It needs a string path, then it needs a string array of content, not the simple data or simple content. I need an array of content. So first of all, I need to create that array, right? So let me create that array. String, let me say array, and I'll say cont. Okay, and then in the curly braces I'll pass the content. Let me say C#, then C, then let me say Java, and then let me say C++. So I want to insert this 4 line of code inside the test.txt. Now I can pass my path, and what else it needs? It needs a content. So I'll pass content. When I run this, you will see that initially we have hello C# in test.txt. Now that hello C# is going to be overwrite with this content. Let me write this. Okay, let's check this out, that the thing happened or not. So now you see here, originally we have hello C#. Now that thing is going to be overwrite with these 4 line of code, or 4 line of content that you just passed. Okay, now let's understand, we have this overwrite problem. Let's fix this with the help of append. If you want to use append, then there is a method called as append all text. it's very similar to that of WriteAllText, but instead of write we will say append all text. Now this append all text will not going to overwrite, okay, not going to overwrite. So originally we have this 4 line of 4 line of content in the test.txt, and when I insert, instead of this, I want to insert some other thing, let's say hello C sharp. Again I want to insert this line. This is going to be my 5th line, okay, 5th line of content, and I want to insert it. So I'll say file dot append all text. When I do that, append all text, not append all text, I think it is append text. Let me see, append text. When I do this, what it needs a path, string path. So I pass this path, and actually it is append all text, sorry, append all text, and append all text needs a string path and content. So now I can pass path and my data. Sorry for that. Okay, now you'll see when I run this, originally we have C, C++, Java and C sharp, and then next line hello C sharp is going to be printed. Let's check this out, test.txt, and you see here what it says, 5th line hello C sharp. Okay, so this is how you can append something in your test.txt file. Okay, now let's say if you want to create some file dynamically, if you want to create some file, how can we create? It is basically, let's say instead of all this thing, I want to create new file from the code. How can I create? Let's say I want to create another file. I'll say new test.txt. okay, so this is the path, and I want to create new file, so I'll say new test.txt. When I do that, basically how can I create this file? I can create with the help of file.create method. So I'll say file.create. What it needs a path, so I'll say path. When you do that, when you run this, and if you check this out here in D drive, you have a new test.txt here. See, if you open this, originally there is no content. This is freshly newly created file that you had just created in D drive. Okay, so this is the create method. Now there is one more thing. There is something called as file and file info. So generally if you are performing single operations, then generally if you are using, see here, if you are using single file operation, something like create, copy, delete, then you should use file. But when the requirement is, if you are using multiple file operation in the same file, then you should use something called as file info. This is the kind of similar thing as of file, but they are different aspects. Comparability is not equal to file. You can actually create the file info object and then you can call that, right? It's something like class. So let's understand that. See, when you use copy function here, file.copy function, you see what it needs. It needs a source file name and a destination file name, right? It needs two variables basically. But instead of that, if you use file info, it only needs one a variable, which is destination. Only it needs destinations. Okay, so you see, if I want to use file info, then basically you need file info. See here, file info f equals to new file info, and inside that you need to give the path. So I'll say path 1, but this is going to be like this is going to be the path of first, the source path. This is going to be my source path, so I'll write source path. Now I need destination path too, so I'll say string destination path, and I'll give the path of that D drive .net, and I'll say new test.txt. Okay, so I have two path now, source path and destination path. So instead of path, I'll say source path. Now, okay, now I will create another instance of FileInfo. FileInfo f. Let me call it as f1 and let me call it as f2. f2 equals to new FileInfo, and I'll pass the destination path. Now you see, instead of file.copy method, I'll use instead of copy, I'll use .copy2. So I'll say f1 because my original file is there, test.txt, and let me call the same file. Okay, my original file is in the D drive and I want to copy it into .net. Okay, so I'll say my original file where it is located in f1 right now. So I'll say f1 dot, we have a method called copy2, and what this copy2 needs, it needs only one variable. Which variable? Destination path. So I'll say destination path. Originally initially we with the help of file, we actually need two variables. One is source path and another one is destination path. But instead of that, with the help of FileInfo, you need only one variable, that is destination path. That's the thing. Okay, if you run this, the same operation happens. Open D drive, we have this test.txt, and when you open .net, you will see test.txt. It has been copied. When you open this, the same line of code or the same line of content you can see here. So that's the .copy2 method, and that's the difference between this FileInfo and file. Let's understand two or more methods of FileInfo.